That's not always necessarily the case. Okay? So you got to be, so those are things we need to take into account. The bottom line from an IR point of view is that terror groups now are basically actors on the international stage. And their support doesn't necessarily come from a nation state, but rather their support comes from different areas of the globe. Different groups provide financial support. Okay? What's the last one we talked about? What's the last one we talked about?
Multinational corporations.
Multinational corporations. So multinational corporations are basically, so we have transnational organizations and we have multinational corporations, MNCs. Okay? Now they are powerful. Why are they so powerful? You know, and here we say impact domestic politics. You've answered 3 already. How about someone else? Okay, someone else. Their nose. Okay, your nose. I'm coming after you next, so you start paying attention. Okay, I'm giving you a warning, right? All right. Yeah. They have money. Okay, they're making money. But what? Okay. Now, when we say impacts domestic politics, what does that mean? What does that mean? Impacting domestic politics. Okay, someone else?
I think they can affect the behavior of the country. Right?
Okay, well, look, that's true, but let's focus on domestic. I mean, how can they affect? I mean, first of all, the fact that they're there within a country means that they've made a decision to invest capital, resources in that country, right? And they've done so because they're happy with or they're content with the rules and regulations that govern their economic activity, right? So typically, if a country is, or a multinational corporation is doing very well, and let's say has put up a factory in a country as to establish a beachhead to a region to produce cars, for example, that would then be delivered, okay, to a particular region, okay? Now they have a vested interest to maintain a profit, right? They've done so because they think they can generate a profit, which means they need to be assured somehow that the government allows them to do what? Continue making cars in an environment that is conducive for the country's profit. So suddenly, if a person comes along and there's a revolution and they decide to say, you know what, we don't like the fact that the French happen to be in have a plant or factory producing Renault cars, we're going to nationalize that plant. What's the corporation going to do? It's going to get very upset, right? And it's going to try to do what? Influence the outcome of the domestic reality. Okay? Didn't that happen in the Cuban Missile Crisis movie? Sugar plants were owned by U.S. companies, and as soon as Castro won the revolution, or they deposed the dictator, and suddenly the American companies were very upset, so they basically turned to the U.S. government and said, we can't have this guy taking over nationalizing because he's hurting our profits. And therefore there were attempts to do what? Somehow remove Castro from the equation. Okay? And it wasn't real, when you think about it, and this is something I want you guys to keep in mind, I don't want you guys to get too cynical, but it's typically always what's in it for this person when they make an argument. What's in it for this country? Why does this country, why does the United States care about Castro? All right, it cares about Castro because of the geopolitical game that essentially was being played. Okay? And that's important. Castro basically hit hard against those interests that owned the tourist industry, or had control of the tourist industry, and also the sugar plantations. Okay? And those are major factors. That's a very realpolitik. A constructivist, on the other hand, would argue, someone would argue what? Castro's running against what? Conventional wisdom of the international arena, which is what? We need to be all democratic, right? That's what a neoliberal would also argue, right? Okay? We need to be democratic. Although a neoliberal will open the possibility for what? To do business with a communist country, as long as what? Okay, both sides get something out of it, right? Economic trade is really key here, okay? Guys, you're looking at me like you're having a problem. You guys have to be able to start thinking in terms of these concepts, all right? Globally integrated enterprise, what does that mean? What's a globally integrated enterprise? What's the hour difference between Kuwait and the East Coast during during let's say 3/4 of the year? Not now. Now it's 8 hours, but it typically is what? I just gave you a hint. Who has friends in New York? Who has friends over in the East Coast? Anybody have friends in the East Coast here?
Yeah.
No. All right.
I'm in America.
Time difference, yeah. You go to your computers, click. This is how you guys are supposed to operate. EST, put in EST, time difference. EST Kuwait. You guys got to be doing this kind of stuff. You got to be proactive. You got to take initiative. Guys, let me tell you something. Any professor who just gives you information and doesn't really push you to kind of trying to interact with that information is not really helping you when they're preparing you for the marketplace. I'll be very honest with you. EST, Eastern Standard Time. Say Kuwait, York, time difference. What is it? Quickly. iPhone. Who has iPhones? You can do it on your iPhone as well, right? I'm waiting for you guys to give me the answer.
6 hours.
Oh, there you go. I'm very happy you did that. 8 hours right now. But most of the year it is
6.
7. 7. It's 8 hours now. But there you go. See that? Okay, I'm proud of you. Very happy you took initiative there. Okay, so you got 7 hour difference, right? Now, work week, the work day typically for most of the world is, for a developed society is what? Forget about France.
Monday.
You know, but it's Monday through, well, not so much 5 days a week, right? But how many hours in a typical work day? 8 hours, right? So let's say we're working in Kuwait, right? 1 hour before, okay, we basically do what? We send all our information where? That we've compiled to my team member who's working in New York. And then he gets all that information. What begins? I leave my office, or we have an hour conversation. I leave my office. What does he do? He begins his day, or she begins her day, and then they work, right? And then they, let's say, decide that there's another company in San Francisco, and then there's another company in Russia, in China. Typically, if you use the time zones very effectively, you could do what? Basically be working 24 hours, 7 days a week. What about production? You manufacture a car in the United States, but you buy the parts of the engines over in Mexico or from Mexico. You buy another device that goes into making the car, you buy that from another country. You guys understand what's going on here? Ford, when Ford sells cars in Kuwait, are they the same kind of cars that people in the United States drive? No. Who said yes? Why not?
Because each environment has its own.
Exactly. Can you imagine driving a Ford in August here in Kuwait? I mean, when it gets to be like 60 degrees, right? There's 2 air filters. What about the dust? Okay, what about the dust? You need 2 air filters here.
Dust and humidity.
You know, so well, the humidity, yeah, but Kuwait isn't as bad as, but the bottom line, the environment is different. Okay? So if I'm Ford, I mean, if I'm basically making cars, I want to make, if I'm targeting, let's say, the Middle East, I would basically want to have a factory that targets that region, right, where I can pretty much build similar cars that I could then sell in that area, right? So I could have one factory devoted to producing cars to the Middle East. I could have another factory producing cars for Europe. Why would Europe be important? We have the European Union, okay? The European Union has its own rules and regulations. You know, I was in Scotland last weekend at a soccer football convention for coaches at the Celtic in Glasgow, Scotland, and we had this one interesting presentation from the corporation, from It's not Gatorade, it's, what's the name of it? It's one of those juice, it has the rights for the European Championship this summer in Poland and Ukraine. It's called, oh gosh, it's one of those kind of Gatorade substitutes for Gatorade. And they were talking about how the formula that they need to follow for European Union is different than the formula that they have to follow to the United States. Which means if you're thinking about a production plant, right, you're basically producing products that are sold in Europe, and then you're producing products that are sold in the United States. Two different types of, same product, but two different formulas. So what multinational corporations are doing now is they're in different parts of the world, okay, trying to come up with the best approach to be able to generate a profit. Apple, where is the iPad manufactured? Huh?
California?
You guys haven't, didn't you guys hear about Foxconn? When I say Foxconn, you know what Foxconn is? Ladies, you're not watching the news. Foxconn, it was a big deal about a month ago where they were investigating the plant in China that was producing iPads. People were killing themselves at the plant because they were working nonstop. Okay? And you guys didn't hear about that?
No.
They had netting, suicide became so rampant that they had net, and I'm not laughing because it's funny, it's just absurd, but the idea, it's just so black when you think about it. They had nets around the windows, on the, like when you go to the circus, and you have these trapeze, and they have the netting in case they fall. Well, they had nets outside around the buildings in case people decided to jump, because people were jumping. Foxconn, you guys haven't heard about it. Interesting. Okay, anyway, so we have multinational corporations. So clearly, these agencies, these companies, these corporations, because of the size and the profit that they generate, they are clearly major players in the international arena. Okay? So let's talk about foreign policy decision making. Okay? So that's it, one far. Now, so what we have here is we have countries, international organizations, multinational corporations, non-governmental organizations, terrorist networks, individuals, and something called endogenous nationalities. When did I introduce the concept of when did I first introduce that concept to you in class? Under what, during what discussion? Endogenous nationalities. When did we talk about that? We were talking about first world, second world, and they would be what?
Ethnic groups and all of that.
But if you were using Cold War speak, they were referred to as
Global
what?
South and Global North.
No, global south, global north is globalization speak.
Developing and undeveloped.
That's standard
Hold on.
speak today. I get first world is what? Second world, and we talked about third world, and then we talked about fourth world, right? So basically these are ethnic groups whose basically presence crosses, overlaps national boundaries, okay? So you have these indigenous nationalities, terrorist networks, and individuals, okay? So these are transnational actors. Now, so this chapter is about trying to understand what influences foreign policy or the decision making of all these different transnational actors, okay? Now, the first factor that's highlighted in the textbook would be global conditions, okay? The second one is international, transnational internal characteristics of the transnational actors, and then actor leadership. Let's start with the first one. What would be global conditions?
Weather, rain.
Okay, environment, right?
Northeast.
What's the new resource that everybody's talking about right now that's really going to be, that is becoming more and more scarce in Africa, and now moving its way up into the Middle East area? What? Huh? Not oil. And what's the other resource we're going to be fighting over? What'd you say? Water. I mean, think about it. Water is really becoming a big deal. All right, everybody's focusing on on